There is life and death in the tongue, that's for sure. And some people just have the gift of cutting you down to the quick. I mean, just dressing you down.
Oh, yeah.
We don't need to hear that. We need encouragement, don't we?
Yeah, we need Jesus Christ.
But we've been going through this book of Matthew, and we covered a lot of parables, haven't we? We came through a lot of parables so far. And Jesus, he loved to teach with parables.
Yes.
And what is a parable? I guess we should have covered this a long time ago, but Webster defines parable. Of course, we all know what a parable is, but Webster defines parable as a usually short, fictitious story that illustrates a moral attitude or a religious principle. And now it's time for some numbers, Brother Jerry. I know you like numbers. How many parables are in the New Testament? Anybody? Without Googling it. Take a wild guess. 30, over 30. How many is in Matthew? 23. 11 unique. Mark contains 8, 2 unique. And Luke contains 24, 18 unique.
Wow.
So, Brother Jerry, you know how to catch a unique rabbit? Unique up on it. I knew you'd like that one. And so after all this talk of parables, we're right back in the middle of another parable. We're at the start of another parable. Matthew 22, verse 1, Brother Tommy. Matthew 22, verse 1, and we're going to talk about the parable of the marriage feast. This is a good one here.
Yes.
Verse 1, and Jesus answered and spoke unto them again by parables, and said, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king, which made a marriage for his son, and sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding, and they would not come. So Jesus has already used several other parables to show what the kingdom of heaven is like. And he continued to explain to religious leaders and to the Pharisees and to the Sadducees and the scribes and anybody else that would listen. He tried to tell them the danger in rejecting him.
There's a very danger.
And he's been patient, but maybe his patience is starting to wear a little thin. But a wedding back then, as it is today, is a big deal. It was a big deal.
Yes.
It's a significant social event in a person's life.
Whoever finds the life, finds a good
That was the next verse down from that, wasn't it? Right underneath that. Where you was reading this morning, that was the very next verse. That's right. But a wedding is a big deal. It's a big event in your life. You know, if you go over to somebody's house and they're married, chances are they got a picture of their wedding day on their wall or something to do with their wedding. But the wedding of a prince would be a spectacular event, and an invitation would normally be prized. This was a big deal. This was a huge event.
Yes.
And it just seems strange that those invited refused an invitation to a royal wedding.
And why?
And this illustrates the principle that there is no logical reason God's good gifts are refused. Why do people deny or reject God? That's a good question. And the real reason most deny and reject God can be summarized in one word: pride. And they want to run their own lives, and they don't want anyone, especially God, to interfere with the way they're living. And they want to be in control of everything they do. And I fight this myself. Fight pride. It's rough.
Sure.
They want to be in control of everything they do, and they know that if they were to believe in God, they'd have to change their lifestyle. Instead of living by their own list of what's wrong and right and wrong, they'd have to take seriously God's moral standards. So to live without God, however, is to live without hope. Hope for his presence with us right now, and hope for eternity.
Yes, it's today.
So instead of knowing that God has put us here for a purpose, they end up living without any ultimate meaning in life. No wonder the psalmist declared, "The fool says in his heart, there is no God." Can you imagine? I mean, this is the way I've thought a lot of times, is especially when you go to the hospital and there's a loved one there. It helps to pray to God. You know, it helps to pray. But then you look at an atheist or someone that doesn't believe in God, and who do they pray to? I mean, the doctor or themselves? I mean, I just never could understand that. Verse 4, again he sent forth other servants, saying, tell them which are bidden, behold, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fatlings are killed, and all things are ready. Come into the marriage.
Get ready.
But they made light of it and went their ways, one to his farm, another to his merchandise, and the remnant, because that's the remainder of them, took his servants and entreated them spitefully and slew them.
For no reason at all.
And when the king heard thereof, he was wroth,
He's mad.
and he sent forth his armies and destroyed those murderers and burned up their city.
He has the power to do it.
So he sent other servants to tell them, everything's ready. The roast is in the oven. Hurry. But the guests that he invited, they laughed and went on about their business. One to his farm, one to the store. And then others beat up the messengers and treated them shamefully, even killing some of them. Then the angry king sent out his army and destroyed the murderers and burned their city.
He was the king.
So I think we could say this was a little bit of overreacting in verse 6, where the messengers were murdered just for inviting them to the king's feast.
They
You
were
know,
guiltless.
there's a lot of things to get mad about in life, but someone inviting you to eat, drink, and be merry at no cost to you seems like a pretty long list of things to be mad about. But the king persisted in making the invitation as attractive as possible. He really wanted those invited to come.
He bid everybody, didn't he?
You think the people would get their feelings hurt because they weren't invited. But in this parable, it's the other way around. People get extremely upset because they were invited. Upset to the point of what? Committing murder. Because they were invited. When a great social event happened in the Jewish culture of that day, people were invited, but without a set time. So they were actually invited twice. They'd tell them a couple weeks ahead of time, hey, we're going to have a wedding. And then on the day of the wedding, they would send a messenger out. And then they would say, hey, we're ready, come on.
Hey, done all he could do, didn't he?
So the king in this parable had long ago sent out his invitations. But it was not until everything was prepared that the final summons was issued, and insultingly refused. All things are ready is the message of the gospel. You don't come to God's feast to prepare your own meal. He has made it ready for you. You come to receive.
Has a table spread.
But they made light of it and went their ways. The reaction of those invited made no sense. But it does give an accurate description of the reaction of many to the gospel. Many made light of it. Others just go back to their business. He was furious. He sent out his armies, destroyed those murderers. The king rightfully brought judgment upon the offenders.
He was righteous.
Not only did they reject his invitation, but they murdered his messengers. And this was a prophecy of what would happen to Jerusalem, the city whose religious leaders so strongly rejected Jesus and his gospel. Let's go to verse 8. Then saith he to his servants, the wedding is ready, but they which were bidden were not worthy. Go ye therefore into the highways, and as many as ye shall find, bid to the marriage.
Open door.
So those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all, as many as they found, both bad and good. And the wedding was furnished with guests. The king was determined that he would not have an empty banquet hall. So an invitation was given to all who would hear. Now when the first and second invitations were so dramatically rejected, the third invitation was made more broadly. All were invited, whether good or bad. And in this sense, we can say this parable is about grace.
Yeah.
those who were invited and who came were utterly undeserving of the invitation, much less the wedding feast itself. Verse 11, and when the king came in to see the guest, he saw there a man which had not on a wedding garment. And he said to them, Friend, how come thou in hither not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then said the king to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. The king carefully examined his guests to see if they all wore the garments that were customarily offered those attending a wedding feast. I'm not sure if they passed out wedding garments at the weddings back then. I don't know. I was trying to find that, and I couldn't find any reference of the Jews, but I did find the Greeks did that, but I didn't find the Jews doing it. But I kind of think they did. That when people showed up for the wedding, they had a garment for this guy, and he's like, Nah, I don't need that garment.
God provides a wedding garment.
Yeah. So the man without a robe, he was conspicuous by his difference. He came in inappropriately dressed, and the king noticed. Now I like what Charles Spurgeon says here. He says, he came because he was invited, but he came only in appearance. The banquet was intended to honor the king's son, but this man meant nothing of the kind.
Yeah.
He was willing to eat the good things set before him, but in his heart there was no love, either for the king or his well-beloved son. Thought he put that pretty good.
Very sad.
So the man who did as he pleased at the wedding feast, instead of honoring the king and conforming to his expectations, he suffered a terrible fate. This parable demonstrates that those indifferent to the gospel, those antagonistic against the gospel, and those unchanged by the gospel share the same fate. None of them enjoy the king's feast. For many are called, but few are chosen. Now this statement of Jesus in this context touches on the great working together of the choices of man and the choosing of God. Why did they not come to the wedding party? Because they refused the invitation. Why did they not come to the wedding party? Because they were called but not chosen. So let's move on. Verse 15. It says, Then went the Pharisees and took counsel how they might entangle him in his talk. And they sent him out unto their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Master, we know that thou art true, and teaches the way of God in truth. Neither cares thou for any man, for thou regards not the person of men. Tell us therefore, what thinkst thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not? So here's the Pharisees and the Herodians, and they're working together now. This was evidence of the great hatred of Jesus, because they were willing to put aside their own differences, and there was a lot, for the sake of uniting against Jesus.
The war between good and bad.
Now we know who the Pharisees are, but who are these Herodians? Herodians. The name of this party probably originated in the kind of hero worship of Herod the Great.
Man, he's an idol too.
The Herodians are often mentioned in the Gospels at the same time as the Pharisees. And like the Pharisees, the Herodians wanted political independence for the Jewish people. But unlike the Pharisees, who sought to restore the kingdom of David, the Herodians wished to restore a member of the Herodian dynasty to the throne of Judea. Jesus had been directly accusing and exposing the religious leaders. Now they're fighting back. Now we see the Jewish leaders launching their counterattack, and they do so by directing at Jesus carefully formulated questions.
Let's get it this time.
Their plotting led them to approach Jesus with flattery. They're going to try it a different way now. They hoped he was insecure or foolish enough to be impressed by their hallowed praise.
That he's God.
The compliment, besides being treacherous, was insulting. implying that Jesus was a reckless simpleton who would give himself away and a vain man who could be flattered. They also asked him, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Now, Jesus' dilemma with this question was simple. If he said that taxes should be paid, he could be accused of denying the sovereignty of God over Israel, making himself unpopular with the Jewish people. And if he said that taxes should not be paid, he made himself an enemy of Rome. They asked, was it lawful? Now, lawful does not refer to the Roman law. There was no question about that, but the law of God. Is it permissible for the people of God to express allegiance to a pagan emperor? Barclay claims there was 3 regular taxes back then. This don't really have much to do with anything, but I thought it was kind of interesting, these taxes they had. There was the ground tax, which was 10% tax on grain production, and a 20% tax on oil and wine. So you had the 20% on oil and wine, 10% on grain, and then there was the income tax, which was 1% of a man's income. And there was the poll tax, paid by every man from 14 to 65 years of age and every woman from 12 to 65 years of age. And this tax was a denarius a year. So they didn't have it too bad, did they, really, if you think about it?
Yeah, there was a temple tax. Well, it covered that too.
Yeah,
Temple tax.
plus the temple tax. I didn't put that one in there, Uncle Paul. That might have been 50% of their income. I don't know how much that
You
was.
know, to pay for that
Well,
temple, the Herod.
Yeah.
You know, of course, they would go to Herod's,
Yeah.
dynasty.
verse 18 says, but Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, why tempt you me, you hypocrites? So he's not pulling any punches either, is he?
He reads their minds, he knows their hearts.
Show me the tribute money, and they brought unto him a penny. And he said unto them, whose is this image and superscription? And they say unto him, Caesar's. Then saith he unto them, render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things which are God's. When they had heard these words, they marveled and left him, and they went their way.
That's their hearts.
So Jesus asked them, whose image and inscription is this? And again, with his wise answer, Jesus showed that he was in complete control. He rebuked the wickedness and hypocrisy of the Pharisees and the Herodians. He said, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. So Jesus affirmed that the government makes legitimate requests of us. And we are responsible to God in all things, but we must be obedient to government in matters civil and national.
Sure allows us to preach.
If you don't believe that, try not paying taxes for a little while and find out what happens to
Yeah,
you.
check out on Hunter
But Peter said it like this. I like what Peter said in 1 Peter 2 and 17. 5 words. Fear God, honor the king. That pretty much sums it up right there.
Love God.
So every Christian has a double citizenship. He's a citizen of the country in which he happens to live.
Yeah.
To it he owes many things. He owes the safety against lawless men, which are only a settled government can give, and he owes all public services. So everyone has the image of God impressed upon them. This means that we belong to God, not to Caesar, or not even to ourselves. It establishes the limits, regulates the rights, and distinguishes the jurisdiction of the two empires of heaven and earth.
We've been bought with a price.
The image of princes stamped on their coin denotes that temporal things belong all to their government. The image of God stamped on the soul denotes that all its faculties and powers belong to the Most High and should be employed in His service.
Sealed in our hearts.
So had the Jews rendered unto God His due, they would have never had to render anything to Caesar. In the New Testament times, they would never have endured the occupying oppression of the Roman Empire if they had been obedient to their covenant with God. Let's move on. Here come the Sadducees. Verse 23. The same day came Same day came to him the Sadducees, which says that there is no resurrection, and asked him, saying, Master, Moses said, if a man die having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up seed unto his brother. Now there were with us 7 brethren, and the first, when he had married a wife, deceased, and having no issue, left his wife unto his brother. Likewise the second also, and the third unto the 7th. And last of all, the woman died also. Therefore in the resurrection, whose wife shall she be of the 7? For they all had her. You think they might be checking to find out what this woman was feeding these guys, you know? I mean, 7 down and she's still living. But the Sadducees were the ancient version of the modern liberal theologians. They were anti-supernaturalistic, only accepting the first 5 books of Moses as authentic and disregarding what was written in those books when it pleased them to do so. The Sadducees were not many in number, but they were wealthy, the aristocratic, and the governing class. The Sadducees asked Jesus a hypothetical and ridiculous question. I'll be closing after this. Hoping to show that the idea of the resurrection is nonsense. And they got this from Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10, which says if a married man died childless, it was his brother's responsibility to impregnate his brother's widow and then count the child as the deceased husband's descendant. That's in Deuteronomy 25. Now the Pharisees imagined elaborate circumstances along these lines and raised the question, therefore in the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 will she be? And probably this was a stock story that they kept setting around and pull out. You know, I don't think this guy just come up with that on the spur of the moment there. They were trying to trick Jesus up, and he just wouldn't be tricked with Brother Jerry. But verse 29 says, Jesus answered and said unto them, Ye do err, not knowing the Scriptures, nor the power of God. I think we're going to wait until next week to see what his answer was. We're just going to leave you hanging. You know?
Everybody's got that. We want to know.
God bless you.